All right, welcome back to Problem Solver Politics. I am your host, Cardin Ellis, with Cody the Oracle.
Hey, everyone.
And Andrew Yang just dropped the much-anticipated climate change plan. We're going to provide you a little bit of analysis and a general overview of said plan. Before we get started, though, we would like to announce, though, it's already trending number what on Twitter?
Let's see. So the most up-to-date number on the Twitter. I can't say the word. Twitter trend. Thank you. God, it is top 5 right now in Twitter trends. As a few minutes ago in the last hour, you could see it's been in the last number 5. I believe it was announced as of time of recording about 2 hours ago. So it took roughly an hour and a half to get this trending on Twitter, which is very cool.
Okay, interesting. So really fast, we're just going to dive right in, go over the overview. I mean, this thing is extremely lengthy. We're definitely going to have a lot of substance to talk about in tomorrow's live stream. But there were some things that I really like. There's some things that gave me some pause, and there were some things that I would just like to get your reaction to, Cody, because I definitely got some first reactions of mine, and then we'll look at what the media has said about this. You can totally tell who's biased against who by how they report on everybody else's climate change plan.
If you disagree with someone, you now are biased against them.
Yes. Well, in certain outlets, yes. So
sorry, Diamondbacks fans, I'm biased against you.
This is more than baseball. So anyway, all right, jump right in. Cody, tell us what's going on.
Cool. So I guess for people who are like, what are you talking about? Climate change? Anyway, so Andrew Yang announced a few days ago in advance that he's going to be announcing today a large, comprehensive climate change plan. Right now, I have a video playing in the background on Twitter of him announcing this plan in Portsmouth, New Hampshire. I believe we were talking. There's like a lot of Portsmouths in the country. I believe it's New Hampshire. It makes the most sense. And he released his new all-encompassing kind of general sweeping climate change plan. So what we're going to do is really quickly go through, and I would say the biggest thing, one, I want to make sure we get the title in. I was actually talking with some Yang supporters the other day, and I said I thought at the debates when he said that we need to move to higher ground, it was like metaphorical. And they're like, no, he meant it literally. And we have here the title. It's worse than you think, lower emissions, higher ground. Now, this is a very, very thorough, all-encompassing document. So we're going to skip down to a little bit here. Is he says that we need to bring full force of America to bear on this problem or we will fail and the world will suffer. My approach is 5-pronged. So very quickly, we'll run through the 5 prongs. Number 1. Build a sustainable economy by transitioning away from fossil fuels to renewable energy, upgrading our infrastructure and improving the way we farm and use land. Public financing options will allow individuals to make the right decisions for their families. Okay. Next, build a sustainable world. The United States throughout history has led the world in times of crisis. We're the most entrepreneurial country in the history of the world. It's time to activate the American imagination and work ethic to provide the innovation and technology that will power the rest of the world, but I actually really like that one. It's really interesting to me. Move our people to higher ground. Natural disasters and other effects of climate change are already causing damage and death. We need to adapt our country to this new reality. Well, I'll get into a minute what I don't like about that. Reverse the damage we've done. Research needs to be done on removing carbon from our atmosphere, cooling the planet, and rejuvenating ecosystems. Okay. Not proactive, but retroactive, right? And then hold future administrations accountable. We need to pass a constitutional amendment that creates a duty on the federal and state government to be stewards for the environment.
Well, that's kind of interesting.
We actually interviewed a woman who...
The Green Amendment.
Who proposed different, probably in the weeds, different stuff. Like, as a whole, similar. So anyway, Cardin, that is the general overview of what Andrew Yang proposed today. It goes through, and I'll just kind of scroll down and show you guys. Like, I mean, we're not just being like lazy here. For time, we can't get it all in this video, so we'll do a longer video for you guys. But he goes through and he breaks down all of it. And what was the link?
Did you have any that jumped out to you? I had 2 that really jumped out to me that I really liked.
Well, I would say the biggest thing that jumped out to me. Here we go. So here is his plan for how we achieve net zero emissions by 2050. I think what jumps out immediately is this understanding of like, yeah, we are not going to do this in the next 6 years. Like Yang saying, I'm not going to have this solved during my term. This is going to take, at the minimum, like 20-something years here. And I think that's refreshing. I'm just admitting, like, look, it's not realistic to have net zero emissions for all transportation sector cars, but maybe 30 years from now or 20 years from now, maybe, right? Like, I appreciate the length of it, and he's giving us time and realizing we can't do this in 5 years.
Yeah.
We have to give ourselves time.
Something I really appreciate about this plan. Okay, let me just say the number one thing I appreciate about this plan is it is substantive. You couldn't help but read the Green New Deal and think, oh, wow, if I just wanted to take over an economy and I couldn't have a revolution in the streets, I would just do it this way, through the back door. There's been all kinds of quotes that have come out from, people at the UN and environmental planners and things like that have said, we're going to redistribute the world's wealth through environmental legislation, and things like the Green Deal and half these talking points you get from the left nowadays literally give complete and total life to Greg Gutfeld's comment that environmentalism is where all the socialists went to hide when Reagan made them not cool anymore. Whereas when I read Andrew Yang's plan, you know what I love? He's a little bit pessimistic. I'll be honest. I think his outlook, Cody, is really a little bit apocalyptic and grim. Even as cynical as I am, I was kind of like, ooh, Andrew, Well, Marianne Williamson needs to give you a positivity orb. But
I saw an article, actually, just really quickly, and they said how Andrew Yang is using pessimism to fuel his campaign, and I thought it was an interesting take. Because in a way, yes, he is, but I think it's interesting.
Yeah, so I think it might have been overly pessimistic, but the thing that I like about it is I do not sense any ulterior motives in these timelines. And they also seem wildly reasonable by somebody who knows what it's like to actually run a business and be subject to regulation. And you'll notice very small nuances here. Okay, establish net zero standard for new buildings. He says new buildings. He kind of understands, okay, there's not much you can do over the old ones. You kind of got to let them phase out, so on and so forth. Begin to use nuclear reactors, and he specifies thorium and fusion and then details the difference between them without going into the weeds. We'll do a second nuclear power video. Our first one was very popular. But we're already getting thorium as a rare earth metal in other mining processes or processes, however you want to pronounce it, depending on which continent you're from. We're already getting thorium from the mining process, and it's like 35 times more effective per ton than uranium is, and like 1 billion times more effective per ton at producing heat energy than coal is, for example.
Hold on, because there's a good point, but I thought would be interesting just going through. If you want, we can really quickly, a lot of stuff here, but do you want to just kind of go over some of the infographics he has posted and just kind of break down some of the other interesting
just let me finish
about
burning through this, how he achieved net zero emissions by 2050. Basically, I like that he says, okay, establish new building standards for new buildings. I actually deal with construction every single day, and some of these new policies are actually very good. To get green energy certified as a building, it's not that hard. You have to do some very specific upgrades, but they really actually do help at burning less energy in cooling down your house. It's impressive. Yeah, let's begin to use nuclear reactors, set zero emission standards for all new car models. Okay, our technology is taking us to a place where we can do that and ensure that 100% of electricity is renewable by 2035. Okay, that's a little bit, if we didn't have all of the unions and we didn't have all of the red tape and the bureaucracy and the paperwork to fill out, I could see that happening in the next 20 years. But still, that's good. At least it's a substantive argument and a substantive goal, not an ideological one. And then enact net zero emissions for all transportation sectors and reduce and reuse 85% of wasted methane. He actually talks about carbon recapture, and we never talk about the fact that 40% of the world's forests have been deforested since we've been able to start just recording that data. Imagine how much better our carbon situation might be if we actually worried about reforestation, for example, actually rebuilding some of these broken ecosystems. There's this man down in Texas that bought a bunch of land that had been completely brutalized by cattle farming, and simply just by planting grass so that there would be topsoil that could retain groundwater when it rained, he created this paradise and rebuilt the entire ecosystem just by walking around planting grass everywhere that was just indigenous grass that had been taken out by the cows in the 1800s. Okay. So I like that Andrew Yang kind of reflects this idea, and then finally aim for a fully green economy. And then he gives a budget overview, which is pretty lengthy, but this actually seems like very doable. It seems naive to the red tape he'll have to go through, but it seems doable and realistic. Cody, is there anything specific you want to go over?
No, like I said, I just appreciate.
I got some things I like, but
I just appreciated the fact that he gave us time. So look, if this is, because that's the one thing I always think, I always kind of joke around like this. People have a habit of making problems sound like they're easier to fix than baking a cake. It's like, oh, the climate, we'll just change a few laws. Like, oh, so whatever we did to the climate was so devastating, it's going to have like irreversible impacts for decades and hundreds of years. But we could just fix it in 9 months if Senate passes the bill. Like, I don't think that's how it works. So I appreciate Yang saying, like, look, it's not going to be something we just pass a bill and it's done. This is a 20-plus year plan that we have to change how we do stuff, and that I appreciate. That was the one thing that stuck out. But I wanted to go through just some of the other infographics on here.
Okay, sure. Go for it.
We have time to cover those, and like I said, we'll do a much deeper look at this later, but I just want to go over because there's some interesting tidbits in these here. Sorry, let me just move this over for a second. Because the next one he brings up, he's actually talking about the effects of global temperature rising. Well, that's interesting. So a child born today can expect to see sea levels rise 1 to 4 feet in their lifetime. We'll say it's pretty big too, right?
I was about to say, I don't want to say I call BS on that, but I want to say I call exaggeration on that.
I would just say it's being just kind of a little bit general and safe, like 1 to 4, right?
Yeah, but that's never even happened.
Either one number or 4 times that number.
Al Gore 20 years ago said that Manhattan was going to be underwater.
Well, no,
we've had a bad 4 years, yes, but then there's also...
Gore.
Okay, keep going.
And rising sea levels will affect 5 million people in the U.S., be a 45 to 87% increase, pretty big too, in Category 4 and 5 hurricanes in the southeast, and the southwest is approaching a 60% risk of 30-year-long droughts. Yikes.
Yeah.
That was, according to the Yang 2020 campaign, that is what we're up against. I was wondering what your take on that is.
Here's my take on it. Okay, the temperature graphs, I've studied the crap out of global warming, climate change, everything from Rachel Carson's The Silent Spring to all of the 20 or 30 credits of continuing education that I have to get every year from the EPA. And we definitely have, since we really started taking good data in the 80s, okay? Some of these first tests were apocalyptic, and some of the first studies done about climate change were notoriously bad because, like, for example, they didn't account for the photosynthesis or the carbon capture that like phytoplankton in the ocean that cover 2/3 of the world's surface would be doing. And there were projections of California being submerged under 20 feet of water in the next 40 years. And it was very alarmist. And honestly, I swear it was almost like it was meant to scare the public, okay? And none of it ended up being true. And the science was bad in the name of science. So it actually did a lot of damage to the name of climate science, right? However, well, and the other thing is we forget that the graphs, even if they're trending upwards or they are trending downwards, these are over extremely long periods of time. And there are periods, even during the downward trends, where we go up for sometimes 20 to 40 years at a time, it's suspected. So our biggest issue right now is we don't know where we are on these trends anytime we have one of these 4 to 5 year different climate years, okay? And there was a period in the 90s where there was this huge inverse of information they were getting, and the early 2000s where the people in the Antarctic were saying, hey, no, we're in a period of global cooling. We need to prepare for a new ice age. And the people up in North America were saying, hey, no, we're in a period of global warming. We need to prepare for climate change going upwards. That actually inspired a Michael Crichton book, right? So now we've basically got, I would say, 12 years of what I would consider dependable data, and it shows that there's drastic amounts of warming, but we don't know still to this day, no matter what Bill Nye says, exactly how much of that is natural and how much of that is actually caused by humans. And we're still trying to figure out what percentage is caused by what carbon gas. We know methane is worse than carbon dioxide, about 8 times worse. So we really need to get down our methane emissions, and we focus on carbon dioxide. But we also worry too much about the gases and not necessarily on much like the reforestation. So without going into the weeds, it's easy to say, if there were no carbon recapture, or if the worst situations yielded the worst results, yes, the sea levels could rise 1 to 4 feet. But these scientists tend to forget the resiliency of Mother Earth and all of the intangibles that you can't test for. Because let's not forget, do you remember how there was the oil spill on the Gulf Coast?
Yeah.
Remember how everybody said, we need subsidies for the tourism industry in Florida because this will have destroyed the beaches for 50 years, yet within like 12 months, you couldn't tell anything had happened. And all of the hotels were open, and pretty much everybody said, yeah, we overestimated the drastic effect of this oil spill.
I thought it'd be interesting to get back to Yang's plan, because I thought it was kind of fascinating he brought this up, but I want to see what you think about this. Is that he had an infographic here about the rising sea levels.
Yes,
And
exactly.
he says that these states will lose up to $23 billion annually by 2030 if sea levels rise by just 6 inches. And he goes on, I'm sure, to explain further how they'll lose the money, but for right now, it's a lot of stuff. And then also, Florida could see a 4-foot rise by 2040. This would cripple about half of South Florida's flood control capacity. So, interesting stuff.
And I've got family in Broward County. I was about going to say a 6-inch rise in sea level is basically going to overwhelm the wetlands and the marshes with seawater and brackish water, eliminating the ability of the Everglades to actually filter the water they need to, which could result in the death of hundreds of thousands of endangered or threatened species. So that would be absolutely catastrophic. So, it's so difficult to talk about this sometimes without this fear of being called a science denier. I want to stress that, yes, I do believe science can glean awesome results. I think we have imperfect methodologies right now. Just like the polling data keeps putting Andrew Yang behind where we see in the streets how popular he is and other polls show he is. I think the methodologies of climate science are definitely skewed and imperfect right now, but the spirit of the plan, the need for us to be good stewards of our earth and to stop damaging the way we're damaging, especially certain ecosystems and certain areas, is true. And the average person can do more damage just trying to live their life than they really realize. And it seems like Andrew Yang's plan compensates for that. So I feel very comfortable with this. There were some things that gave me pause, but it was a small pause. And there were some things that I really liked. I really liked his... He specifically addressed the transportation and the air. I think that was because of what the Green New Deal had said about, the kerosene jet fuel not being able to be outlawed. I thought it was really interesting that he once again dove into the data of energy, specifically nuclear energy. And then I really, really like how he called it actually a stopgap and then said a grid modernization race to the top that really talked about entrepreneurship and public-private partnerships unleashing the creative and intuitive mind of the American people. And at some point, I didn't notice it in here, but at some point he's going to have to deregulate some of these industries in order to do that, because I know tons of Caltech geek friends. I'm in the EAA, the Experimental Aircraft Association, and my uncle actually created a patent for one of the first hydrogen cars, like back in the 70s, or I just remember GE bought it and just sat on it. But I can't tell you how many of these uber geeks could be the next Elon Musk. They just don't have the PayPal capital to get lobbyists and overcome all of the red tape and the bureaucracy like he is. We have so many genius people with genius ideas. I have seen mock-ups that have been tested off the coast of San Diego where we harness hydroelectrically the power of waves with underwater ballast tanks that rise and fall against increasing pressure with the rise and fall of the tides. I mean, we don't realize it, but per hour, the waves that crash against our shore generate the same kinetic energy as 3 or 4 tons of dynamite. If that could be harnessed, it would be the same as having like 10 nuclear power plants for every 1 mile of coastline in California. And we have never actually harnessed that power. There's people that have plans and machines and prototypes that can actually do it, but they just have not been able to get through the Coastal Commission's red tape or been able to get through the bureaucratic red tape of Sacramento and so on and so forth. So we have really gotten to a point where we are stifling our own ability to improve the environment because of legislation meant to improve the environment. So he didn't mention anything about deregulation here, which I think maybe because it's a naughty word on the left, but I think it might be necessary in order to truly harness all of that ingenuity from the American people. But either way, I veered far too verbose. I think it sufficeth to say that this is good. And it gives us a lot to talk about, and I'm really excited to dive in the live stream about it. And this is the kind of attitude, except for the really pessimistic stuff, but the solutions, at least, this is the kind of attitude we need towards the solution of climate change and indicative of why I like Andrew Yang. Where do I go wrong, Cody?
I don't know, man.
You're just gonna let me go there and be like, yeah, whatever. Yeah.
I mean, I don't like I said, when it comes to this stuff, I'm more interested in learning and listening. To be frank, I don't know anything about. I'm no climate scientist. I don't know anything about environments. I don't know what the weather was like 1,500 or 500 years ago in this very spot. I don't know any of that stuff, man. So
10,000 years ago we were in an ice age.
I take everyone's word with a grain of salt, so to speak, and just try to figure things out. I mean, I thought it was interesting. Andrew Yang brings up, for example, it's a good reference. He brings up on his thing the cost of natural disasters, and he has all these natural disasters costs. But I wonder, and I'm sure he goes in more in depth, but just like, are all these related to climate change? I mean, the wildfires in California, we always have fires, and part of it's because we're a really big state with a lot of dry, arid areas where stuff dies, and then when everything's dead for 15 miles, one spark lights a big fire. So sometimes it's not always climate change. Maybe it is, right? Like, I just wonder, I'd like to see more referencing, because we can put all these numbers together and come up with a really big number, but hurricanes didn't happen before, you know what I mean? So, but that's what I'm more saying. Like, some of the stuff I always just kind of listen to and go, interesting, but I don't know if I'm sold necessarily. But I thought it'd be cool. We'll go over the last one, the little infographics he has here. And we'll finish on this card. And what do you think about his plan to geoengineer our planet?
Let me scroll down to it really fast.
I'll have it right here on the screen. So he wants to seed the ocean by increasing the population of carbon-absorbing plankton, as you spoke about.
Yep.
He wants to afforest, so plant trees do increase oxygen. It's good.
Okay.
Carbon capture, direct capture and storage of carbon dioxide. I don't know how you do that. Space mirrors reflect the sun away from Earth. That's like a SpongeBob. Like, why don't we just put a giant mirror up and reflect the sun away? And then stratospheric aerosol scattering injects sulfur dioxide in the stratosphere to reflect sunlight away.
Okay, so
interesting.
I got to tell you right now, the ocean seeding I don't think is necessary, because the ocean can do it itself. It just needs to be put under less stress. I deal a lot with trees, for example, and if bark beetles and natural parasites, there's been a lot of, unfortunately, imported parasites here in California that are just devastating the trees. Because of the drought, for example, I believe it was, don't quote me on the statistics, but I'm in the ballpark, about 30 to 40% of all of the oak trees surrounding San Diego were unfortunately just decimated by the golden oak ash borer. And sorry, not ash borer. Sorry, let's just say bark beetles. I'm totally forgetting the name. But what happens is they were under stress because of that 3-year drought that we had. It was the worst drought we had in a long time. And so we didn't need to necessarily inject pesticides into the tree, just like I don't think we need to seed the ocean. If we could actually just water all the trees with 10 gallons for every inch of DBH, which is diameter breast height. Which is the circumference of the tree, basically, or the diameter of the tree at a human's breast height. So I don't think ocean seeding is necessary if we could get the stress off of the ocean that is making it so the phytoplankton aren't reproducing as quickly as they should. I don't think we need to do stratospheric aerosol scattering. Okay, that actually kind of freaks me out. Not really interested in that. However, like afforestation, plant trees to increase oxygen, yes. Absolutely, as long as it's done with native species in areas where they were before, where we know that they can grow and so on and so forth. I really think that's one of the number one things we need to do, because it also gives habitat recovery to all of the species that have been dislocated or now are no longer here. We don't have grizzly bears in California anymore, for example, because so much of their habitat was taken away and they were hunted. Whereas if you could reintroduce the megafauna into these newly forested areas, that could be wildly effective for the ecosystem as well. Carbon capture, there's some interesting companies in Scandinavia that have talked about capturing carbon and like turning it into some kind of edible substance that looks like flour. I think Finland did that. It's kind of interesting. And then space mirrors. Now, I don't think that the carbon imprint used in constructing all those mirrors would be worth it. And also, if we were in the business of constructing something to reflect the energy of the sun, why not just build more solar farms based off of mirror technology, so on and so forth? So anyway, at the end of the day, I like that he's coming up with these ideas, and these ideas don't feel like they were meant to just increase the government's control of my life, but were actually meant to solve a problem. So anyway, we're We're actually going to dive into this a lot more in our live stream tomorrow. And we were going to go bit by bit down Andrew Yang's climate change plan, because there's no way you could do this in just a 15-20 minute video. If you guys want to contribute to our channel, please check out the PayPal link in the description. Your guys' contributions are how we can continue to grow and continue to post more videos every day. If you haven't liked our video yet, please like it. If you want to subscribe, there's an icon right here that you can press to subscribe. And here are the last 2 videos that we've made. If you've missed those, make sure you check it out and make sure you comment below. This is Problem Solver Politics.